Has the fear of failure stopped you altogether from going after something you have passion around? In today's episode, I'm going to be discussing the concept of failure, what so many of us misunderstand about it, and how we can begin to start shifting our mindsets to use it to our advantage and thrive in our personal and professional lives. I'm also going to be providing tangible examples from my own experiences with failure and successful women that I have learned so much from along the way. But first, if you're new here, welcome to the Mindshift Mami show. My name is Jazri, and I help women become more successful in life and aligned with their authentic selves using the power of mind shifting. Let's get into today's episode. Failure is a concept that is crucial for us to understand through the right lens, because how we perceive failure can truly, single-handedly make or break how much success and satisfaction we get out of life. A simple way to remind ourselves if we are perceiving failure correctly is to identify if we are interpreting situations from a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. In general, a fixed mindset has more limiting, negative beliefs, while a growth mindset is more expansive, empowering, and accurate beliefs. So when it comes to failure, how do you define it for yourself? Have you ever thought of yourself or someone else as a failure? I know I've identified as a failure. According to Dr. Carol Dweck, a world-renowned psychologist who has done decades of research around mindset, thinking about failure as an identity that you or others hold is thinking about failure with a fixed mindset, which can hold us back greatly. Looking at failure as an action, so something we or others may do, but is separate from our identity as a person, is viewing the concept of failure from a growth mindset perspective. So to recap, a fixed mindset views failure as a reflection of one's identity, thinking statements like, I failed at that golf game, therefore I am not a good golfer. A growth mindset views failure as simply an action, therefore there is always an opportunity for growth and learning. I failed at that golf game, but with more practice, I will become a better golfer. As Dr. Dweck says herself, in a fixed mindset, the loss of validation after failure is devastating. In a growth mindset, it is a way to grow. So think about the times that you have failed at something. How did you take that failure? Were you devastated? Were you embarrassed to the point that you didn't ever try something similar again? Has the fear of failure itself stopped you altogether from going after something that you have passion around? These sort of reactions point to us identifying too much with failure as a part of who we are, rather than it just being the byproduct of something that we tried and didn't get right away. When it comes to our careers, our relationships, and parenting, it's important that we are adopting a growth mindset around what failure is, so that we aren't unconsciously limiting ourselves and our families. So let's apply this mind shift on failure to our everyday lives, starting with our careers. With a fixed mindset around failure, we may view a failed business idea or a missed promotion as a reflection of our own abilities. We would take it entirely too personally, identifying with the loss, feeling like a failure, and likely feel resentment, embarrassment, sadness, and other negative feelings. With the growth mindset, we may feel disappointment, sure, but we would mostly choose to see it as an opportunity for feedback and growth to improve our skills and strategies. I can say from my own experience, this mind shift is so helpful and necessary to adopt. Years ago, in one of my first jobs out of college, after about 3 years at the organization, I applied for an internal position that I didn't end up taking because we couldn't agree on a salary that matched the additional responsibilities. Now, in a fixed mindset, I could have internalized that situation and looked at myself as a failure, as if it was a reflection of me as a person not being worth the extra money. which I probably did feel that they thought at the time. In a fixed mindset around failure, I would have internalized their decision to not meet my salary requirement and believe that I didn't have the ability to take on more responsibilities or that I wasn't worthy of a higher salary. Thankfully, I knew in my soul I could be doing more than where I was. And what I ended up doing unknowingly at the time was utilize a growth mindset perspective and capitalize on some of the feedback I had received. So when I had applied for that internal position, one of the higher ups at the time suggested that as part of my interview process, I create a 90-day plan for what I would set out to accomplish in that new position. I took it seriously, created a PowerPoint deck, and presented it at my interview. When that position didn't end up working out, part of me didn't mind too much either because I had already decided at that time that I was ready for something new, whether it was with them or somebody else. I had applied to an outside organization around the same time. And during my final interview with that outside organization, I utilized the strategy that I had learned and provided them with a 90-day plan as well, even though they didn't ask for one or require one. I ended up landing that position, which was a more aligned fit for me, gave me so much room for growth, and nearly tripled my salary. I believe that me coming prepared with that 90-day plan helped boost their decision to hire me. And that is a prime example that we cannot identify with failure and let it stop us in our tracks. Instead, we can always choose to learn and take something from it and end up in a better situation than we imagined. Another great example of a woman refusing to identify as a failure in her career journey is Jamie Kern Lima. After being frustrated with makeup that would easily wipe off and couldn't cover her rosacea as a TV anchor, Jamie decided to quit her job and set out to create her own makeup line back in 2008. She received hundreds of no's from Ulta, from Sephora, QVC, and investors. They all turned her away because they didn't believe that women would buy a makeup brand whose marketing showed a woman like her with her body type and real skin issues. Jamie would be crying herself to sleep. She was broke, but she refused to give up. And in her own words, she refused to equate all the no's she was getting to doubt in her own head. Thanks to Jamie's refusal to view those failures as an identity of her being a failure, she followed her inner knowing and kept pushing on with the brand, and eventually she secured a QVC opportunity. Jamie used the little bit of money she had left to hire third-party marketing consultants to advise her. They recommended going with models who had flawless skin, and they were mortified when she suggested showing older models, models with hyperpigmentation, and her own bright red rosacea during her QVC segment. As much as she struggled with her fear of failing, after lots of prayer and time to herself, Jamie knew she needed to be authentic to herself and her brand, even though it had never been done before. Jamie went with her gut and her own marketing idea, sold out her makeup stock before the QVC segment even ended, and to make a long story short, she had the best-selling makeup brand in QVC history and eventually sold her company, It Cosmetics, to L'Oreal for $1.2 billion cash. She also became the first female CEO of one of its brands in L'Oreal's 100-plus year history. Jamie's full story is super inspiring, and if you need an inspirational boost to follow your dreams, I highly encourage you to listen to her episode on the Mel Robbins podcast. So remember, ladies, when it comes to our careers, there is always a seed of opportunity waiting in the failures. And when we choose to get silent and listen to our own inner knowing that we all have, that opportunity will grow into successes that we could never even imagine. Now, when it comes to relationships, and in particular marriage, it is so important that we break away from identifying ourselves and our partners as failures when we have conflict. Our society sells this fairy tale image of marriage where you're supposed to get along with each other all the time and never have issues or disagreements. And if you do, you're automatically with the wrong person. But after 5 years of marriage and witnessing marriages around me, I know that's just not true. It is so perfectly normal to go through conflicts in marriage, especially in the beginning, and especially with raising children. What matters is how we approach the issues and that we are being mindful about not labeling our partner as the issue. Because again, when it comes to failure, labeling somebody as inadequate is not helpful and instead can be very harmful. So for example, in a fixed mindset, we can feel like a failure for letting our temper get the best of us in an argument where we end up shouting. Instead of wallowing in that guilt or worse, saying that's just our personality, we can use that as an opportunity to shift into a growth mindset and choose to actively improve our communication skills. And the goal isn't to completely get rid of conflict in our relationships. Conflicts are a part of growth and learning each other. The action we can work to improve is our actual communication skills, our emotional intelligence, and addressing conflicts in a respectful and mindful manner. Ever since I've started adopting more of a growth mindset around failure, I don't look at me or my husband as a failure or stuck in our ways when it comes to us having conflict. I've changed how I approach situations and now let him know if I need time to process something before discussing it. And then we address it at a later time when I'm more emotionally regulated. We also now do a better job at explaining what both our thought processes were when a conflict occurred. And every time we have taken the time to hear each other out, I realized that what caused the conflict in the first place was likely an assumption or a misunderstanding of each other's intentions. I recently heard some great advice that said when it comes to our partners and them doing things we're getting triggered by, always assume positive intent. It's a principle that's based on the idea that people are often stressed, clumsy with their words, innocently making mistakes, or just do things in a way that may be different than the way we would do it. I have a recent example where my husband was picking me and my daughter up from an evening walk around the neighborhood, and we had a disagreement about the spot he parked in for us to get into the car. So in my husband's eyes, he picked a safe spot because it was right next to a sidewalk on the passenger side of the car. However, we would have had to cross the street to get to him, and since it was getting dark, I felt like him pulling up right next to us on a side street was safer. With that being said, that would have meant my daughter and I would be getting into the car on the roadside, which my husband felt was unsafe. So we kind of got into this little back and forth where I refused to cross the street because one, I disagreed with that being the best option, and two, I just wasn't assuming positive intent on his end. I assumed just because he didn't pull up right next to us that he didn't care about our safety, and I was annoyed. It wasn't until after the fact when I cooled down and we later discussed it that he explained his thought process about the sidewalk being the safer option on the passenger side. I was then able to see that safety was both our end goal. And we were able to have this conversation and apologize and hug one another in front of our daughter, which was an added bonus. Children are constantly watching us and soaking in how we address conflict. So it was imperative to me that we modeled a healthy conversation where we reached that understanding through that initial conflict. It also made me realize now that I believe if we happen to have an argument in front of our children, then we should intentionally reach a peaceful solution in front of them as well. Assuming the best of our partner's intentions can lead to better outcomes. And when it comes to my own relationship, I realize that I do innately trust my husband, and I do believe that any decision he makes is for the betterment of our family. So now, instead of getting immediately offended by something right away and assuming he doesn't care, I'm taking a step back and I'm recognizing that that's a limited belief that I'm projecting onto him, and that's not fair to him. That's me operating from a fixed mindset. Now I work to remind myself to assume positive intent first. And something that can help is simply asking questions afterwards before jumping down our man's throat. We can ask them, what was your thought process behind that? and let them explain it to us before we jump to conclusions about what their actions mean. And ladies, when we're asking them, we need to make sure that we are being genuinely curious when we ask this question. Don't say it with an air of negative assumption. We need to assume positive intent. There's an interview clip of Michelle Obama speaking about her marriage that I just love. She touched upon the idea of being frustrated with your partner, feeling like things aren't fair, especially when you're raising young children together, but still respecting them as a person and not throwing out the marriage just because of conflict.
People think I'm being catty by saying this. It's like there were 10 years when I couldn't stand my husband.
You do say that. You say
10 years. And guess when it happened? When those kids were little, right?
Yes.
Right? Because, you can be all great individually when you're just married. You got your life, he's got his, you come together. It's all, ooh, good to see you, bye, take it easy. And then you have kids.
Not take it easy.
Take it easy. You're traveling. That's great. Good. I get to hang out and watch the TV I want to watch.
Right.
But the minute we had kids, it was like, where are you going? And how far? And you start measuring. It's like, how many diapers did you change? And oh, you're golfing? Oh, you got time? Oh, you got time to golf? How you at the gym all the time?
Why you in my brain right now? I'm like,
that's when all the measuring starts, because you got this project.
Yes.
And guess what? Little kids, they're terrorists. They are. They have demands.
Oh my God.
They don't
You're
talk.
right.
They're poor communicators.
Yes.
They cry all the time. They're irrational.
They're selfish.
Needy. And you love them more than anything.
Oh.
And so you can't blame them.
No.
Right? Because look, they're cute and he's so cute. And look at him throwing his plate. That's so cute. So you turn that ire on each other.
Yes.
And for 10 years while we're trying to build our careers and, worrying about school and who's doing what and what, I was like, oh, this isn't even.
No.
And guess what? Marriage isn't 50-50.
Yeah.
Ever. There are times I'm 70, he's 30. There are times he's 60, 40. But guess what? 10 years, we've been married 30.
Wow.
I would take 10 bad years over 30. It's just how you look at it, right? And people give up for the 5 years. I can't take it.
How
it was
do you
bad.
know? What is the, because sometimes
You got to know your person. Do you like him? I mean, you could be
Right.
mad at him, but do you still look at him and go, I'm not happy with you, but I respect you.
Right.
I don't agree with you,
Yes.
but you're still a kind, smart person.
Yes.
The feelings are going to change over time, right?
Yes.
You're not going to always be. So the minute that goes, people want to give up on it.
It's true.
But now you're in the work. You're in the work of it, and that's why I want to talk about the work of it, the work of any relationship, the work of friendship.
So we come across failure in our careers, in our relationships, and we know now not to identify with it and instead see it as an action that can be learned from. The question now is, how do we make sure our children aren't perceiving failure in an unhelpful way? Luckily, there are plenty of things that we can practice to help our kids have a healthy, growth-minded relationship with failure. The first thing we can be mindful of as parents is to make sure that we ourselves are not labeling our children. Labels can negatively impact children's self-esteem and limit their potential. They can also influence how children are treated, what is expected of them, and who they become. Instead of calling a child a troublemaker or a bad boy or a bad girl, we need to separate the behavior from their identity. Instead, we can remind them of their own power to change the negative behavior by giving them feedback and helping them to find a positive alternative. As Dr. Dweck says, when we're in a position to discipline, we need to ask ourselves, what is the message I'm sending here? I will judge and punish you, or I will help you think and learn. Now, to make parenting even more challenging, research shows that even positively labeling our children by praising them on their intelligence or their talents has a negative effect of making them doubt themselves as soon as anything is hard or anything goes wrong. So instead of just saying things like, "You are so smart," Parents can instead teach their children to love challenges, be intrigued by mistakes, enjoy effort, seek new strategies, and keep on learning. That way, children don't have to be slaves of praise. They will have the tools to build and repair their own confidence. And for me, I'm trying to be more intentional to compliment my 3-year-old on trying things that are challenging for her. I was definitely that parent who would be gushing over my child saying she's so smart when she was doing her writing activities and other things. However, I later noticed firsthand that she started immediately giving up or not even trying on things that were challenging or that she couldn't do perfectly right away. Like writing certain letters or numbers. She wouldn't even pick up the pencil or crayon or whatever. And I definitely do not want her to become a perfectionist at just 3 years old. So I have definitely been mindful of this advice and this research, taking it to heart. And now I focus instead on praising her resilience, about learning being fun, more so than the end product, and identifying her with that sort of thing. Another great strategy for helping children, especially older children, embrace failure and not be afraid of it is by going around the table at dinner time and having everyone share something that they failed at that day. We can ask questions like, what mistake did you make today that taught you something? Or what did you try hard at today? By excitedly talking about our own efforts, strategies, setbacks, and learnings, plus making it a family activity, we model to our children what it is like to use a growth mindset and not be afraid of failure. By the way, Sarah Blakely, founder of the billion-dollar company Spanx, was raised by a dad who had the family make it a practice to share one thing they failed at every day. She started her company with only an idea and $5,000, and she was willing to take risks, endure setbacks, rejections, and stick with it until she succeeded. Those are the qualities of someone who isn't scared of failure. So my final thoughts. When we change our relationship with how we perceive rejection and failure, we change the trajectory of our entire life. When we remove the action of a failure from identifying as one, it makes it less personal. And therefore, we're willing to do it more often and courageously. When we realize there is always a seed of opportunity and something we can learn from a failure, we get to a point where we actually embrace failure and we're willing to go after it instead of hide from it. And when we do this, all aspects of our life flourish. So now I'd like to end this episode with a few empowering affirmations to help us embrace failure in life. It is common, if you're not used to affirmations, to feel feelings of awkwardness or discomfort. But over time, I promise you that discomfort is going to decrease and you will have conditioned yourself to learn a new empowering way to speak to yourself. So if it's safe for you to do so, you can place your hand on your heart and repeat after me. I am capable of learning from my failures. I am capable of learning from my failures. Every failure is a step closer to success. Every failure is a step closer to success. I embrace challenges and grow from them. I embrace challenges and grow from them. I am resilient and adaptable. I am resilient and adaptable. Failure is not the end, but the beginning of new possibilities. Failure is not the end, but the beginning of new possibilities. All right, y'all. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me and Zoe here a thumbs up, a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode of the Mindshift Mommy Show. Keep shifting those minds, and I'll see you next week. Take care. Bye. Zoe, you're so cute. Getting fur everywhere, though. Oh my goodness. Holy cat fur. It's raining cat fur. Hallelujah. It's raining cat fur. Hallelujah. Trying to throw paws.